Hello, I am Marcy Setlow, and I'm the publisher of the Berkshire Edge. And I want to welcome you to the first in a series of business-oriented webinars that the Edge will be producing. These webinars are part of our new business coverage, our focused business coverage, which we're calling Business Monday, although we are having this webinar on Wednesday. But we have been aggregating our business news on Mondays lately, and sending out emails to subscribers announcing our Business Monday lineup. And so this will be really the first of several webinars. We have more in the works, so we're delighted that you're here to be part of our maiden voyage, as it were. You know, we created Business Monday not only to report on business news, but also to try to build connections and conversations and the exchange of ideas among members of the Berkshire business community, because we like to say at the Edge that we don't just report the news, we build community. And that's what we've tried to do in the 9 years now that we've been publishing the Berkshire Edge. And we hope to do that as an active member of the Berkshire business community. I also want to thank our very generous sponsors. We are able to bring you business news and business webinars because of the generous support of our two sponsors. Berkshire Money Management is our lead sponsor, and we also have very generous support from Lee Bank. Let me tell you what the format of today's webinar will be. First, I will introduce Kim Campagna, who is the Marketing and Communications Manager at 10,001 Hours, which is a spinoff of Berkshire Money Management, excuse me. Then I will come back to you and introduce our moderator, Bob Braddock. The format of this webinar will be that we will have about 45 minutes of discussion among our three panelists, whom Bob will introduce to you when he's on the screen. Then we will have a Q&A session, and we request that you would please put your questions in the Q&A so that we have them ready to go when we begin our Q&A period. You can also continue to add questions during the Q&A period, but if something comes to you while we're in discussion, please put your questions in there first. So now, as I said, we have two wonderful sponsors, Berkshire Money Management and which includes 10,001 Hours, and Lee Bank. And I want to introduce you now to Kim Campagna, who is the Marketing and Communications Manager representing today 10,001 Hours, which is a spinoff of Berkshire Money Management. So Kim, welcome.
Thank you, Marcy, and thanks everyone for joining in. 10,001 Hours is proud to sponsor Business Mondays and this fantastic webinar tonight as a way of supporting our local business owners and their local businesses. Like Marcy said, 10,001 Hours is a spinoff of Berkshire Money Management. We partner with the owners of mature companies who either want to sell their business for top dollar or they just want to rest easy knowing that they can. And we'll work with you to prioritize, delegate, and focus on the projects that matter most so you can build a business that'll run without you. A business that allows you to take vacations, and one that is more profitable today and more valuable to investors tomorrow. You can visit our website, 10,001hours.com, to find valuable advice on topics ranging from hiring and staff retention, which I would imagine is a hot topic tonight, to tax optimization and even self-care for busy business owners. Or in Alan Harris, our CEO's bi-weekly column in the Berkshire Eagle, Mind Your Business. Before I go, on behalf of 10,001 Hours, I want to give everyone tuning in tonight a free copy of Alan's book, Build It, Sell It, Profit, Taking Care of Business Today to Get Top Dollar When You Retire. You can visit 10,001hours.com/hospitality. That link is in the chat, so you should be able to see it right there. It's 10,001 hours spelled out with numbers, not written out with letters. And we'll get your info and drop a book in the mail for you. So thanks everyone for joining in, and have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Kim. I can use that book. Now I have a great pleasure in introducing Bob Braddock, who will be our moderator this evening and who has been really very helpful in helping us plan this first webinar. Bob, we are very lucky that Bob decided to retire to the Berkshires several years ago after an active and successful career in management consulting. And since he came to the Berkshires, he has been very active across the region. His interests are higher education, entrepreneurship, and regional economic development, and he is working very actively at the intersection of these three areas of interest. He is an initiator of the Berkshire Tech Impact Collaborative, which is a multi-function platform to advance our region's digital and tech economy. He served on the board of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, also known as OLLI. He's a mentor for students at Berkshire Community College and a coach for early stage companies. And Bob will introduce our three wonderful panelists. So
well, thank you so much, Marcy. It's a real pleasure to be with you all. And hello, everyone. What's the current state of hospitality and restaurant sectors in the Berkshires? What are the trends, opportunities, and challenges? What's going on? Where are we going? These are the questions that we're going to tackle together today, capturing insights from an all-star panel here, broadening our community learning and having some fun along the way. You know, we very much aware, I think all of us, that the hospitality and restaurant sectors are critical to the Berkshire economy. And these businesses have been experiencing very significant, perhaps outsized consumer demand, especially post-COVID, but at the same time being challenged by rising food prices and labor shortages. So as this inaugural webinar for the Edge Business Monday, let's roll up our sleeves here and introduce our exceptional panel and get this discussion going. We'll first hear from Simon Dewar, who's General Manager of the Red Lion Inn. Vern Kennedy is owner of Number 10 in the Morgan House Restaurants. And Laura Brennan is here as the Economic Development Program Manager at Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. So feel free, participants, to put your questions in Q&A. And Simon, I'm going to pass it over to you to kick us all off, followed by Vern and Laura, providing a little bit more background about your business, yourself, what you see going on and so forth as a setup for the broader discussion. Over to you, take it away.
Thanks very much, Bob, and thank you so much for allowing me to join this panel. Fantastic opportunity. A little bit of background on myself. I've been a hotelier for about almost 20 years now. Most recently, I was over in the Catskills, so not too far away. Full disclosure, I've been at the Red Lion Inn for 7 weeks. However, from about 2008 to 2016, I worked here in the Berkshires, so in Lennox. So it's really me coming home than really learning the Berkshires, and an awful lot has changed since I was last here. Just to talk about business, as Bob pointed out, COVID is over. The pandemic has ended. And much as has happened historically with end of world wars or the end of Spanish flu, in our minds, we get back to business as usual very, very quickly. Within hospitality, there has been some significant changes, however. We have seen a real uptick last year and running into this year with pent-up demand for travel, which has seen across the hotel business a raise of our rates to claw back some of the losses that were suffered during the pandemic itself. And up to a point, that's great for the bottom line. However, with that raised rate that we're charging comes a raised expectation, and we've almost experienced a perfect storm in that area, because we're charging a little bit more for our rooms. And initially there was very little service because COVID was to a degree an excuse. We didn't need to be in rooms and servicing rooms because we didn't want to have cross-contamination, but that's over now. And where I say it's kind of a perfect storm is we saw an awful lot of people decide that hospitality was no longer for them during the pandemic. And so the big struggle that we're looking at now as operators is both attracting and then retaining those key staff. There's been some dividends. We've seen a raise in wages, particularly in the entry level within hospitality, which is about time. Housekeeping is one area within hotels where the staff work exceptionally hard, and for many, many years were probably undervalued in terms of their compensation. And so that has been one increase that has been fantastic within hospitality itself. We've also seen, I think there's been a little bit of a change in travel. A lot of people bought pets during the pandemic and now want to travel with those pets. And I think hotels that are able to, make the leap of faith and become pet friendly have an advantage. The days of not traveling with our kids are long gone. We want to spend time with our families now that we're able to travel again. And so family travel is very big. And I think we certainly, what I've noticed both in the Catskills and in the time that I've been here is there is an uptick in people tying vacation or leisure travel with business. Again, as a spin-off of the pandemic, much as we're doing here, we're on a Zoom call, a Zoom meeting. It means that I can travel with my family. I can still connect with business, but I can sort of merge the two together, which is a big advantage. So that's kind of a snapshot of where I feel we are at the moment, the sort of threats to our business, but also that expectation, which is really, really important.
I guess that's over to me now. I'll introduce myself. I'm Vern Kennedy, the owner of Number 10 Restaurant in Great Barrington and the Morgan House in Lee. Just by way of a little bit of background, like probably half of society, I started my life off working in restaurants, then went off to business school and went a traditional business route and worked mostly in high-tech startups. About, I'll say, a decade or 15 years ago, decided that I really missed the restaurant business, the dynamics of that daily service. And so got back into the restaurant business and own a series of restaurants around the country, but based myself here in the Berkshires and focus my time on Number 10 and the Morgan House. Picking up on something that Simon said in terms of what we're currently seeing in the industry, there's clearly been a pandemic dividend, as Simon mentioned. I'll say for us, it hasn't been quite so much that we're seeing a higher rate due to excess demand as just we're seeing a much higher year-round population. I'd say pre-COVID, we regularly saw a 50% difference between peak season and winter season in terms of volumes of customers. For the last 2 years, between the summer peak and now the slowest part of winter is maybe a 20% decline, which is fantastic for us. So it keeps the engine operating at a relatively steady pace year round. The other thing that we saw during the pandemic is, we were forced just by the threat of failure to be able to operate with a much smaller staff. And so now, even doing the same, if not more volumes than we were doing going into the pandemic, we're doing it, I'd say, typically with about a third fewer staff. Because as Simon mentioned, the biggest challenge that we have right now is attracting and retaining people, particularly in the lower wage jobs. Another one of our challenges certainly is energy costs, and it's not in the way necessarily that you would think. Certainly our energy bills are quite high, but I say oftentimes that my biggest competition isn't the restaurant down the street, but the gas station. And what I mean by that is, for a family here in Lee who used to fill up their truck for $30 each week, now that's $100 to fill up their truck. And they have to find that $20 someplace. And so they probably cut back on one trip to a restaurant. So we have to find ways to bring them in the face of higher energy costs. I'm obviously optimistic on the restaurant space and looking at other opportunities here in the Berkshires, but doing it again with the very clear-eyed vision that staffing is a challenge. So, and with that as a quick background, I pass it over to Laura.
Thank you. Thank you, Vern. Hello, everyone. I'm very glad to be here, honored to be a part of this group in this first of many webinars. I am the Economic Development Program Manager at Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. Part of what that means is that I serve as the liaison with the Federal Economic Development Administration, who guides us through, as a region, every 5 years, the development of a comprehensive plan for Berkshire County as it pertains to economic development. It's called the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or CEDS. And I see some people on the guest list who are involved in, at least are from organizations who sit on our CEDS committee. So it is a truly region-wide effort as we put that plan together every 5 years. We published the most recent CEDS just earlier this year. And it was a benefit to us that the timing of that allowed us to do some good looking back at impacts of the pandemic. Had our CEDS been published in early 2020, I would have been asking to start all over again a year later, knowing that the measurements of economic distress, the measurements of what the conditions, the current conditions of the region were, would have been vastly different. So thankfully, I guess, our timing encapsulated a look back at the time that immediately preceded 2023. We also at BRPC are the liaison for the fairly newly designated Economic Development District that encompasses all of Berkshire County. Again, a designation that comes through the federal EDA. So it's our job to keep tabs on how things are trending, not just in the economic development program, but also in terms of demographics. And we track a number of indicators that are related to education or public health and environmental fields. And so I want to just start by sharing a link to our Berkshire Benchmarks website, which will be helpful to many people. Let me just make sure. I don't think I can send this to attendees, so if somebody could help me get that through, Evelyn, to attendees as well.
Yes.
Thanks. Berkshire Benchmarks is a clearinghouse of data for the region, and so I just wanted to put out to people if you are looking for information on how things are trending in a number of areas. So as we developed this most recent CEDS for Berkshire County, we did a lot of interviewing of business owners and business leaders to understand what they were experiencing over time. We heard a lot about supply chain concerns. We heard a lot about employment issues, both in terms of layoffs and furloughs to rehiring. Another theme that I think we recognized pre-pandemic, but really the curtain was pulled back on the concerns around childcare and how that impacts people in every industry, the ability to go back to work with limited and in many cases unaffordable childcare options. And then certainly another cross-cutting issue is housing. In our preparation for this discussion, that was one of the things that both Simon and Vern brought up as certainly impacting their own workforce concerns. I think I can stop there for now. I'm happy to hand it over to Bob for the first question.
Yeah, well, thanks all very much. One common theme here, regionally as well as nationally and in many respects, is workforce. And I'd like to laser in on that a little bit and have perhaps each of you comment as to how you're addressing these workforce shortages. What do you see within the broader community from a standpoint of housing and so forth to support workforce? Is it a full-time versus a part-time thing? Are you getting folks from the region? Are you trying to get them from outside? Probably both, but what are you seeing happening there? And are there any hopeful signs or solutions that you're working on or you believe that the community is or should be working on? So I know that's quite a bit, but if you could just address this whole workforce challenge from your various perspectives, maybe starting off, if it's possible, with Simon.
Absolutely, Bob. Thank you. Yeah, very common theme, and across the industry, everyone I speak to, colleagues from across the country, very, very big challenge for us. And I naively, as the pandemic was coming to the end, I thought all our prayers are going to be answered. Everyone's going to be back to work. Where are they? What can they be doing? Everyone needs a job. I think, and again, I think this is a spin-off and a benefit from the pandemic. I think a lot of companies, including or managers, including myself, have had to really focus on the teams that we've got, creating that work culture that makes people want to stay with a company. And it's not always just about financial gain and compensation. We've seen a raise in wages, and of course that is important to everyone. Got to be able to afford to live, but it's not everything. It's also about quality of the work environment in which we are operating. We're very fortunate here at the Red Lion Inn with we've got a great executive chef who really focuses on that culture. We're all big fans of Ted Lasso, and I think that's a good role model for many of us, who particularly those that come from an older generation. And as a company, looking at the benefits that we're able to offer to our workforce. So it's not just about that rate dollar per hour for the staff themselves. So that's one thing. When we can find the staff, let's try and keep the ones that we have. I think it's beholden on all business owners in the area to play fair. Don't go offering a little bit more money here to take other people's staff. That just raises wages across the board. And we've all got we're greater than the sum of our parts. We've got to play nice in the sandpit. We're fortunate here at the Red Lion Inn that we have some accommodation that we are able to give over to staff housing, and so this year we're bringing in a number of young ladies and gentlemen from overseas on the J1 program. The J1 program being the experiential program, and that's certainly a big help for us, and that has touch wood from the feedback from my team this week. We seem to be in a relatively positive position. That said, in the back of my mind constantly, whether it be managers or our associates, is there's a lot of opportunity out there, and it comes back to the culture and the management of that team to retain them at the property, so that they don't go chasing big dollar signs. I'm not, I'm as quickly as I can becoming familiar again with the area. I think it's probably no different to everywhere else that I've operated, where that staff housing or that ability for people to afford to live somewhere is a concern. And the Berkshires is very attractive, and I'm sure, and I don't have any figures on this, but I'm sure during the pandemic we saw a lot of people look for second homes who could afford it. And of course, that pushes up the overall price and the overall rental market price. So I do think that is a big challenge for those entry-level line staff who are living, you know, paycheck to paycheck. And anything that as a community we're able to do to tackle that problem, I think would be a game changer for the area.
No, that's great. Thanks so much. Vern, I'll come over to you in a second here, but my takeaways are love your team, have a winning culture. If you can provide housing, all the better, but I'm not sure others can so easily.
Right.
Because that's a very big issue for sure. Vern, any thoughts about this?
Sure. I will say, and it's interesting that Simon brought that up. Certainly, and it's, you know, it's sort of one of those classic truisms. The employee you have, like the customer you already have, is the easiest one to keep. And so definitely focusing on employee retention is high. I would say, you know, across both restaurants, I don't think I've had any turnover since the pandemic. Interestingly, identical to Simon, and it's a unique situation here. The Morgan House is both an inn and a restaurant. And unlike Simon, I have no interest in being a hotelier. So instead, I let out the 11 rooms to the staff at the 2 restaurants. And that's critical. I would say definitively, I wouldn't be able to retain particularly a lot of the line cooks and back of house staff if I wasn't offering that, you know, lodging component as well. I will say that for the first time, and this is sort of a, you know, a nice, you know, the clouds clearing on the horizon moment, the last just recent, you know, few months, I've had people walking in over the transom looking for work. And that's coming at the end of probably a 2 or 3 year drought of where we would have to go, you know, looking for people when we needed them. Now people are proactively coming into the restaurant. I will say more just for, you know, rounding out the conversation, you know, because I always scratch my head, where do these people go? And there is an industry that really was just created in the last 3 or 4 years that's very popular here in the Berkshires, and that's the legal cannabis industry. And they employ a lot of the folks who used to be in the restaurant space. So, you know, it's not that there's excess, you know, restaurants out there, it's that now that cohort of employees has multiple different opportunities to try other industries. Finally, I'll say, you know, like Simon, we've seen some wage inflation, but it's not for competitive reasons. It's more just keeping people in line with the cost of living. I can't think of a time where I've had an employee come to me and say, hey, I need a raise, otherwise I'm going to go work for another restaurant. It's been, you know, I'm having trouble paying my electric bill, or I'm having trouble, you know, feeding my family, and that's why I need a raise. So I'd say that's sort of where we are right now. The final thing on employees is, you know, we've had to take a fairly pragmatic view that the restaurant will be as busy as the number of employees that I have. You know, so I fortunately don't have the issue that maybe Simon does, where I can only guess you probably have a few hundred employees. I can manage with a few dozen, which is nice. So
no, that's nice. Could both of you comment, and then I'm going to turn to Laura, maybe to give us some sense for what trends she's seeing in these regards in the broader community, and any other anecdotal thoughts she has. But I'm just curious about this idea of wage inflation and poaching, and the fact that it's possible. So in the particular businesses that you're in, it would seem to me that you would encounter situations potentially where someone is being offered more money in a different industry in the same region. But what I'm taking away is that it's that everybody's playing pretty well in the sandbox, to use, you know, the term that Simon mentioned, and that there's not a lot of wage-based switching going on. It's out there. You're watching the wage environment, you're responding to your workforce, but it's not a big factor. Am I hearing that correctly?
I would definitely say that's the case. Yes. You know, like I said, and this is not only from my own personal experience, but, talking to other restaurant owners, which is something I do on a daily basis. We don't see people hopping from restaurant A to restaurant B unless restaurant A is closing, which has certainly happened. It's more they're going from restaurant A to cannabis shop B, just because the employee wants a different experience. They want to try something else. They want to get out of the kitchen.
Yeah, anything to add, Simon?
Yeah, I'm sort of, I suppose, to caveat it, if we get away from that potential poaching, and I'm glad to hear that it's a positive environment I've walked into here. The other thing, the kind of barometer that previous properties I've really kept my eye on is the fast food industry. So, if a fast food outlet is paying X for pretty much unskilled cooking, it's assembly, at that entry level line cook, which is the engine of the food and beverage operation, it's going to, we need to do the right thing and make sure we're valuing their skills, and we're paying more than that fast food outlet is able to pay.
Yeah. Laura, you want to weigh in on any or all of the above?
Sure. I think the discussion around wages is critical, at least at the time that we were documenting these data points, creating our most recent reports. Accommodation and food services was amongst the top 5 in terms of average weekly employment in the Berkshires. That's even across the year, not taking into account seasonality. But it was the lowest of those 5 in terms of average weekly wages. And so clearly, as Simon and Vern have recognized and acknowledged, there's a real need to make adjustments to that in order to keep people part of those great teams. What I am also hearing from some entities around the region is that they are really expanding their thinking in terms of other benefits that are being offered, including access to insurance and access to mental health services. I think that it is an extremely high-paced, high-stress environment to be employed in. It's also incredibly invigorating, but there is burnout, and the need to sort of think of the whole employee is a more accepted and I don't want to say popular, but frequent thing that I think people are embracing, employers are embracing. So that is certainly a part of it. I think we also have work to do in terms of if the workforce pipeline and making sure that people see hospitality, tourism, broader sense as a real career track kind of situation. Unfortunately, I think we hear glib comments about it being leading to dead-end situations, or that things are part-time or seasonal, but there's so much more to the sector. And if we have more informed discussions around career possibilities, then I think that we will also impact what the workforce situation is.
That's great. I'd just be curious about the picking up on your point, Laura, about pipeline. Talking about pipeline and education, readiness, coming from the regional ecosystem, the public education, higher learning institutions, programs and so forth. Is that a feeder that you're tapping into? Is it adequate? Are there things that could be done that would enhance it in terms of regional success? I don't know, Laura, if you have any views to that, or
Yeah, I can start, but I also want to hear, what the on-the-ground experiences are. I know that there is a lot happening at Berkshire Community College in terms of developing programs and making sure that we're being responsive to the needs of the employers. I would also point to the work that the employment board Mass Hire and all of the associated entities are doing to try and make sure that training grants are available to employers. I think that's something that our region does not tap into nearly enough. The ability to access funds to do on-the-job training, to do training that allows people from advance from one point in your company to an area of larger responsibility. So I think it's more of an awareness issue than a services being available issue. But all of that said, I think we have to pay attention to what types of jobs we need to be training people for,
Right.
what our employers are saying they need now and 5 years from now. The state issued a future of work report, I'm going to say 2 years ago, that was somewhat reflective of the impacts of remote work and hybrid work, and indicating that we were going to see declines in jobs in the hospitality and food service industry. I don't think that report takes into full account the ways that tourism, outdoor recreation, arts and culture all tie into a much more closely woven web of job opportunities in Berkshire County specifically. So I don't carry the same pessimism about reduced job opportunities in accommodation and food services as the state's sort of more general report does.
Right.
I'm interested to turn that back over to Simon and Vern.
Well, I'm seeing very busy streets in all of the Berkshire towns and visitors and a lot of economic activity. So I got to believe, and I don't know, reservations and restaurants seem pretty robust as far as my observation, as well as the whole hospitality sector.
And Vern also indicated, something that I think is really important to mention, and that's that the high season is a much longer season than it used to be. And so we have, just different traffic patterns and levels of visitation in the spring and the fall that we've been all working hard to impact for a really long time, and it's coming to fruition.
That's great news. Or you mentioned that there is funding available to businesses and organizations, if I heard you correctly. Just could you put that into chat, or Evelyn, or where do people go? Because there is capital sloshing around in many ways these days. Even though the overall economy is, going sideways or worse, we'll see. But there is capital out there, right? So for internships and training and so forth. So if you could share that with the participants, that'd be great. Yes, Vern, could you unmute yourself?
Yep. I just wanted to pick up on one thing that Laura said. And my answer would be, I'll probably be able to tell you a lot more tomorrow. So talking about, feeder and programs into the industry, one of the groups that we at Number 10 partner with is the Railroad Street Youth Project. And we help them do they do a sort of a springtime training for a group of kids, probably about a dozen or so this year, where we take them into the restaurant and they see what it actually means to work in a restaurant and what prep is like and what working on a line is like. And it culminated last Saturday, where they actually help us prepare and serve a meal to about 180 people under their big gala. And then coming out of that, we actually made offers to 2 of them to come and work in the kitchen as sort of apprentices. The first one of which is actually starting this evening down at Number 10. So if you get salad or dessert at Number 10 tonight, it's probably going to be from one of the kids that joined us from Railroad Street Youth Project. But it's an example of one of those sort of feeder programs that are out there, and we'll see how it works.
Simon, any thoughts?
I may be slightly controversial here. I love Vern's point there of using the local market. I have been a huge fan in other areas where I've worked of the community college program. We have some exceptional hospitality and culinary schools in this country. The unfortunate thing is that if you attend those schools, you know, by the time you finished, you have probably a little bit of money to pay off, or quite a lot of money to pay off, and you have an expectation. You are not going to be entering the workforce as a housekeeper, and and Vern may have some stories about this. Even if you enter the culinary world, your expectation is probably that you should be at a executive chef or a sous chef level. And so the great thing about it's a lot of these are practical skills, and doesn't require higher education. It's not devaluing it in any way. But in the kitchen, it's very much hands-on, as it is in housekeeping. So those higher education establishments that we have are great for potential future managers, interns, but it's very much the guest-facing side. I think where there's opportunity is feeder markets into the kitchen. And forgive me, I've not looked deeply into the community college culinary program here at the moment. It's definitely on my list, because also just by nature, a lot of students who are attending community college are doing it for financial reasons, and so it's an opportunity to mentor and bring them into the workforce. And I used to be a soldier for many years. We learned in the British Army that if we could get young men and women in at 16, even though we couldn't send them off to fight, you can indoctrinate them. By the time they're 18, they're in for life. And it's the same with any industry. We can get them young enough, we can influence them, and we can turn them into amazing deliverers of hospitality here in the Berkshires and in the wider states and the world.
Well, this is excellent. Let me switch gears a little bit. So we've been talking about the management of the business a bit, in particular, doing a drill down into the workforce element. Let's talk about your customers. So they're paying a bit more, pretty much all the way around, it sounds like. I've experienced it for sure. But there's no lack of demand. So, but there, it sounds like that it was mentioned earlier, they're looking for more. I'm not sure how that's defined, or a different kind of experience. So could each of you talk about how you see your customers changing, how they have changed, how you think they may change looking forward, and how you're adjusting to perhaps some elevated expectations because they're paying a bit more?
So I think it's kind of twofold. There's a generation who were unfortunately hitting retirement, getting ready to travel, and then were told they couldn't travel anywhere. And by the way, they were high risk, so they actually couldn't even step outside their house. And so I think there's and we're still seeing that not pent up demand, but now they're able to once again travel, which is fantastic, because the younger generation are earning the money to afford to come and travel. And when we look at that sort of generation behind them and the younger generation, this has been a theme sort of pre-pandemic, that people are looking for more experiential travel. So it's not just about going and staying in a swanky hotel and having something nice to eat. It's about the entire experience, and that's very much on us as deliverers of hospitality. And we've really got to think about how we embrace that and we deliver on that expectation. Utilizing that word that's suddenly become very vogue, the emotional intelligence, to really understand those individuals. It's no longer one size fits all. It's no longer just about, like I said, the room or the meal. It's that whole travel experience. And so here we're trying to embrace a little technology as well to help us with that, so that we can communicate through text, through email, both prior to but also during the stay of the guest. There's so much that's opening up again here in this very cultural region that we have of the Berkshires, and we're now in a position where we're able to very quickly spread information about what there is to do, what other great restaurants there are in the area, maybe down in Lee. What's going on at Tanglewood, what's going on at Jacob's Pillow, where should they head up to Masmoka and look at the art exhibits there. So we're seeing a bit of a benefit of the the retirees, which certainly has been my impression since I've been here, because we're not yet really into season. But from previous properties as well, I think it's that really focusing on that experiential travel and how we connect the guest to everything that's going on here in the local area.
Right. And I suppose there's a higher demand for concierge-like guidance around that too, that may be
almost training all the team to be a concierge. Everyone, whether you're the greeter at the front of the restaurant, the person serving them, the person at the front desk, or a dedicated concierge.
Yeah, everyone is in the customer experience business, the customer service business, no matter what role you're in.
Yeah.
It sounds like, yeah. I just mentioned to all the audience, continue to populate the Q&A as we move along here, and we'll turn to that in a few minutes. Thoughts, Vern, on how your customer is changing, how their expectations have evolved, where you see it going?
Sure. First, I'll start with one area, because again, I've got two very different sets of customers. The socio-demographics are very different between my customers in Great Barrington and my customers in Lee. But first, I'll start with the area where they're the same. And that's that, interestingly, I have never gotten pushback in the last year about any price increases that we've put forward on our menus. Any price increase that we put forward is a direct function of food cost increase. And I think all the customers in either town understand that. Everyone shops for groceries. Everyone sees the prices of things going up. They expect food costs to go up. They expect to see their restaurant prices go up. So I'm not seeing anything on that front. I'm not seeing in the way that Simon might be, I'm not seeing a change in expectations in terms of the level of service for what they're paying for. But I am seeing, I'll say, a different interest in the different communities. So in Great Barrington, which tends to be, again, the more affluent, they're not as price focused. They are looking for more interesting reasons to go out to eat. And so, for example, in Great Barrington, we run special menus each month. And so in addition to our regular menu, we did a lamb menu in January, a duck menu in February, a seafood menu in March, a fish menu in April, something to give them, something different, a reason to come out. Drive 20 minutes up the road to Lee, and you're going to see a very value-driven customer.
Mm-hmm.
And so, our busiest nights are going to be our burger night on Wednesday, where it's a buy one, get one free. And that gets back to that, when you're filling up your pickup truck and it costs you $100, you need to find ways to save money. And so we become participants in that.
Yeah. Laura, do you have any thoughts on this, the customer side of it, and both in this and the hospitality and restaurant sector? Any data that you might have around what's happening to the demographics of the region and how that may be filtering through? Because it sounds like perhaps you're seeing more retirees. I don't know if I picked that up correctly, Simon, I don't know about Vern. I mean, in Great Barrington, maybe that's a segment of the population that has the financial wherewithal to go out more often necessarily than a family of four, that's pulling the oars, at that particular life stage. I may be off base on that. Any thoughts? Maybe to Laura first and then around the table further.
Sure. So from a visitation standpoint, we are very happily seeing that the average age of a traveler coming into the Berkshires is lower than it was the last time that any real thorough surveying was done. Those are stats that are coming from One Berkshire. And I think that's very promising. I think that indicates a need to sort of assess how we're communicating about the region and how we are communicating about individual properties, what kinds of tools we're using to do marketing, how we're allowing people to access amenities once they're here. We are definitely seeing an uptick in interest in outdoor recreation, specifically both from visitors and residents. And just speaking of being everybody's concierge, the regional planning agency and several partners are working on a comprehensive outdoor recreation website for Berkshire County that's going to be published later this year. So everybody will be able to point visitors and residents who are asking questions about what to do to this site that will have a great ability to explain what it is that is at these different hiking spots or boating spots or whatever. And also I hope to, one of my goals for that is to get people better dispersed around the region, and we maybe see less impact on some of the too heavily trafficked outdoor spots. I bring that up because it really does, I see it as completely intertwined. You know, somebody coming into the region and visiting, they may select their hotel, they might have an understanding of a cultural venue that they know they want to check off their list, but they're going to be asking a lot of questions about where to eat and where to enjoy the scenery. And we all have to, you know, have a good sense of how to guide those folks in a friendly way, in a welcoming way. And I have certainly seen more willingness to think that way across different sectors that serve tourists and or even just residents who are recreating. I have the opportunity to do some hyper-local work as well as the regional economic development that I talked about before. And one example is that I provide staff support to the Great Barrington Cultural District. And so that group, as well as the steering committee in the Lenox Cultural District, have just been very interested in finding ways to work together and to do cross-marketing and to develop programming that points people back and forth to different venues and you know, creative economy players. So I think if we can keep going with that, even as things ramp up and we all get busier welcoming visitors and dealing with that pent-up demand, if we can still continue to think of it as something that we are all in together, and that restaurants should be working with museums, should be working with theaters, should be working with hotels to do packaging. And I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
From a resident perspective, I'll just add that while we are still waiting for more detail about specific age cohorts, we do know that the anticipated decline in population in the region is not nearly as dramatic as the projections were saying. So to the tune of several thousand people that we thought we were going to lose, or that the US Census thought Berkshire County was going to lose, that has not occurred to the extent that predictions were
Right.
showing. So I think that we need to dig into that further, obviously, and see about the different age cohorts. But I think that's some important good news that people should keep in mind.
That is wonderful news for sure. And also, you know, we just feel it in the DNA of the region. It is a collaborative, kind place, you know, with in terms of the culture. And you've just picked this up from this conversation about the collaboration across the community and information sharing and so forth. Evelyn, I just wanted to give you a heads up, maybe to prepare a question or two, depending on how many we have in the chat in a couple of minutes, and then just see if Vern and Simon, if you have any other thoughts in this particular area that we're talking about in terms of the customer experience and what you're seeing in the demographic, et cetera.
I would just, just to caveat my comments on
Right.
experience of retirees. That's just in my last 7 weeks, so
Right.
it's maybe slightly jaundiced in that respect. I love what Laura's saying about us being greater than the sum of our parts. It's fantastic if we are all, if every business within the hospitality and museums and cultural areas are all able to champion one another, that impression for the outsider coming in is fantastic. They have an amazing experience, and we all collectively benefit. Very positive, fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
I mean, I'll throw a couple of thoughts in there as well. Certainly in terms of the sort of co-marketing and cross-marketing, obviously based on its location, we at Number 10 do a lot of work with the Mahawi Theater. I mean, we share a wall with them. That predated COVID, but it's always been a very strong program. We are this weekend going to do our first cost promotion with one of the cannabis companies, and we'll see how that goes. Again, it is the growth industry right now in the Berkshires, and so why don't we try to, find a way to work well with them. In terms of the customer demographics, I would say definitively, I've seen over the last 3 years of the 7 years that I've been doing it here, the number of year-round, the percentage of population staying here year-round is much higher. Every week I find someone else who has used to be a second home for them, and now they've decided to make it their year-round home. And that's really what's taken away those winter doldrums we used to have. Yeah,
that's terrific. Well, there's going to be a kind of a wrap-up question that I want the panelists to think about, and as we'll get some participant questions first, and that is, if you look out 3 years, 5 years, maybe that's too far to predict anything, but what do you see for your particular business and for the region more broadly? What's it going to look like? How do you see the trends, taking us forward? So if you could give a little thought about that, and then we'll come back around to it. Evelyn, do we have some questions in the Q&A, hopefully?
Yes, we do. We have a couple, both around staffing, no surprise. So the first one is, how large is the staff reduction in the off-season? Are people fleeing your industries because they are at risk of seasonal layoffs?
I'm happy to go first on that one. Again, the off-season is not a fraction of what it used to be. So yes, there was definitely a time, if you go back pre-pandemic, when our staff would drop by half. And that was obviously very difficult to do, and then get those people to stay or to return. For the last 2 or 3 years, we haven't had to drop staff at all in the winter. There's, I would say a lot of folks voluntarily go from 5 days a week to 4 days a week, just to sort of, give them, frankly, a little more time. I mean, the industry is a fairly demanding one. And so having a few months where you only have to work 4 days is attractive to people. So we haven't had to proactively, I'd say, terminate people. And we haven't had people leave because of that.
I think it's been the same here at the Red Line Inn, and it's been seen as an opportunity to, we have a great paid time off benefit for all our staff here. It's an opportunity for them to then use that time. We still have a ramp up in the summer. There is still a need for additional staff, but I think it's been a very similar picture to Vernon. There's a recognition that we want to retain those staff. So although the bean counters looking at the balance sheet, it doesn't look particularly positive. It's the right thing to maintain, those wonderful and very capable staff, and you're taking away, it takes away that that need to retrain, refine, rehire as we do go into that season, albeit that it's being stretched out now, and we're seeing much less of a sort of drop away.
Okay, the second question that we have is, what is being done to tap into the growing immigrant population? The questioner comments that New York has experienced significant influx, and it's close to the Berkshires, and one can imagine that the same may be happening here as well.
And traditionally, it's always been a lot of those positions I talked about that, don't require the college degree, have often been filled by immigrants. I am an immigrant myself here in the United States. Here at the Red Line Inn, we have a very diverse team. I think, and I don't know how it came about. I'm sure it was through referral between the team itself who are already here, but we've got a great team in the kitchen who are Portuguese speakers, Brazilians. We've got some Hispanic speakers as well, and I think that's not going to change, because that's been the industry norm for many years. How we actually tap into it, I'll be open to any suggestions, because I think it's wonderful if we can bring more on to the team.
Yeah, I would say at number 10, we haven't seen much of an impact or even visibility to it. Maybe that is some of those folks who I mentioned earlier that we are getting sort of proactively walking across the transom and seeing if we have work. We currently are fully staffed, so I probably haven't been we haven't been paying attention to that quite as much. Whereas if we were looking to hire people, we probably would be learning more about who they were and what their background was.
So I would just add that, the immigrant population is one of our fastest growing segments in Berkshire County, as it is in, regionally proximal larger cities, as the commenter suggested. And it is underutilized. I'm not sure if that's the appropriate term. I have anecdotally heard from employers that they're not sure how to move forward, how to make connections with new residents. And so one suggestion that I have is to reach out to the Berkshire Immigrant Center and determine whether there are any formal programs to, get job availability in front of their network. I think diversity overall is increasing slowly in the Berkshires. From 2010, we had in very broad terms, 8.8% of our population was other than white. And in 2020, that percentage was up to 12.3. So we're seeing an increased diversity of our population. What is not well counted for in that is the immigrant population. So it's actually probably far more diverse than we are able to officially document.
Those are great questions. I may have faded away there. I have an internet challenge here, but I think I'm fully back. And you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I do have one more question.
Good. Yes.
For Simon.
Yes, please.
For Simon in the hospitality in particular, are you seeing competition from the Airbnb, the proliferation of Airbnbs in the region?
It's a really good question. I can't answer it for here. I don't have any sort of data on that, but I'll talk about my experience elsewhere. I think that bubble sort of has crested a little bit. We were very worried a few years ago, and it was definitely impacting occupancy on the Rhode Island shore where I used to work, and up in the Finger Lakes in New York. I think that it's kind of crested. It's still there. It's still definitely an option for guests. But if you are looking to go and stay in a hotel, you're looking for some service. You're looking for some experience, not just a room or a house to stay in. So I'm afraid I don't know for this area yet. I'm hoping that it's going to be similar to elsewhere, that it's not the threat that we once thought it would be.
Thank you. Okay, there's three other questions. Does or can local food sourcing have a profitable place considering the greater food cost inflation?
I think that one comes to me probably. Local food tends to be more expensive than the food that I can buy from, I'll say regional suppliers. Local food has a place in our business, but it's more of a specialty item. So around now through the summer, for example, we'll usually feature and highlight one or two items that we'll buy from local farms. But the center of the menu, as I'll tend to call it, I would not be able to do the volumes that we do strictly from local operators.
I think it's pretty similar for us. I have visions of being a gentleman farmer. I do a bit of intensive gardening, I would describe it as, and I'm a huge fan of the seasonality and the produce that we get in this area. The chef here, he comes from that school as well, and so where possible, he absolutely wants to utilize local. The trouble comes with the cost and the consistency. I don't know if there's any entrepreneurs in this area. Certainly, we were very lucky when I was on the Rhode Island shore. There was one guy sort of put together a cooperative who could actually deliver on price and volume from the local farmers during the season. Outside of the season, we're again back to the big producers.
I can just add quickly that I think one of the concerns is volume, as you're mentioning, and for producers in our region, there's really limited access to cold and frozen storage to be able to accumulate the kind of volume and preserve it that would be needed to sell at the levels that restaurants need, even a single restaurant. So that's something that is certainly being worked on, but is going to take some time to resolve. I think we'll see some improvement in sourcing when that's really more readily available.
Great. So we have two questions from one attendee. The first is, what are the panel's thoughts on the Berkshire Flyer Test and Learn? Interesting. I guess in bringing business to the area, bringing new visitors to the Berkshires.
Can we answer a question with a question?
Yes.
What is the Berkshire Flyer?
Maybe one of your fellow panelists can.
So okay. So I do. So this is the train coming up from Manhattan. Yes,
yeah.
That's the
Yes.
I think it's a great idea. My understanding is it's a pretty small number of people that it's able to bring up. If it can prove a concept, it'd be fantastic. It's not just from a bringing people to the region, but from an environmental point of view. The challenge is once you get here, so you get dropped off at the train station. At that point, what do you do? We don't yet have any young entrepreneurs who've really built up an Uber market here. We as a hotel don't have a hotel car, so you've got to be able to get from train station to hotel. Environment wise, it's a great idea. I just don't know whether it's quite where it needs to be just yet for supporting business here.
No, it had a very limited season last year because of a number of constraints that were out of our control. So it's the train arrives on Friday evening, it leaves Sunday evening, I believe, or afternoon. And so it is limited. It's really does not benefit residents of the Berkshires who want to go to New York in an opposite direction. So, it has its limitations. I think the pilot season last year was successful, a good start. We have a much more extended season. We're actually starting this weekend with the flyer. As opposed to, I think it was maybe even July 4th in 2022 that it began running. But as Simon indicated, it's the micro transit needs that are not yet met fully for people who are disembarking in Pittsfield and want to go elsewhere in the Berkshires. There definitely needs to be more coordination around that. And of course, it is one train a week, so it is a limited number of people who can really take advantage of that.
Okay, the final question, I think, Bob, dovetails with what you sort of gave as the wrap-up question. What are the panel's thoughts on sorry, I was going to repeat that same question. What are the panel's thoughts on small food and hospitality business growth in the Southern Berkshires? And I think we can expand that to all of the Berkshires, not just Southern. Whoever wants to jump in and take that.
I'll jump in, but I don't know that I have any really valued answers. I mean, the hope is that it's, we're going to see amazing growth. Having been away for several years and come back to the Berkshires, it is a true world-class gem in everything that is available here for guests coming into the area. Without I obviously want our hotel to be extremely successful, but we have everything we need, and it's just down to energy and enthusiasm and really sort of remaining nimble to adapt. Respecting the past, but embracing the future. There's a good politician's answer for you.
Vern?
I'll jump in. Yeah. So I would say when I look at my crystal ball, the next 3 years look very positive. Everything that I see in terms of the trends for the last 2 or 3 years, I see them continuing for the next 2 or 3 years. It's when I look out beyond that I start to worry about some of the constraints that we've talked about before, whether it's housing or transportation or parking or, that's when I start to say, will some of those start to catch up to us? That's where I would start to get nervous. But for the next 2 or 3 years, even my somewhat pessimistic self says, I see pretty good skies for the next 2 or 3.
It's good. Laura, how's it looking from your seat?
I think, I'm really bullish on the Berkshires, as you may have picked up on. I think we have the opportunity as individual communities to really move the needle on some of these, what feel like enormous, overwhelming issues like housing. I'll use that as an example. If people who are talking about these topics really advocate for the adoption of programs that allow for increased housing development at all levels, we will be able to really change the situation that we're currently considering a crisis. But it does take advocacy and it takes action at the local level. Some examples that I want to just encourage people to learn more about are the Community Preservation Act and affordable housing trusts within your community. There are several municipalities in Berkshire County that have adopted each of those, but we have a long way to go. And both of those are tools that can be used to rather rapidly make a difference in terms of what developers are capable of doing and the range of price points that are being constructed. It's still challenging. I'm not, trying to be Pollyannish about it, but I think we have to recognize that if we don't provide tools to the developers that we're expecting to build housing, then then we will continue to be stymied. So that's just one example of the kinds of cross-cutting issues that we need to start working on together. I'm going to drop one more link into the chat, hopefully to everybody, and that is a toolkit that we have begun to build on our website, berkshireplanning.org, that includes very brief summaries of those kinds of tools and opportunities that can be enacted to make sure that we are providing livable situations to the people that we want to employ.
Very important, and certainly in the dialogue up and down the county for sure. So Evelyn, I think that's it for our questions, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Any final thoughts before we wrap up here? Simon, Vern, Laura? If not, then I want to, on behalf of the Berkshire Edge, thank you, panelists, for just a terrific conversation on the state of play and where things are going in the hospitality and restaurant sectors across the Berkshire region. And thank you, participants. We thank you for your questions. A special thanks also to our sponsors, Berkshire Money Management, 10,001 Hours, and Lee Bank. As I think Marcy noted at the outset, this is being recorded and it will be available shortly. So keep an eye out for that. Please feel free to share with business colleagues, friends, and anyone you can touch across the county, because we want to continue to promote the learning across the county on various areas that influence our business success. So with that, stay tuned for the next webinar. See you then.
Can I just jump in real quick? Did you
Yeah.
mention that we are recording this and it will be available?
I did, and I will
Okay,
again.
sorry.
Yes, it will be available, and look for it. So with all that, have a wonderful evening, and thanks for your participation. Bye-bye.
Thank you.